Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to U.S. Home Talk. I am your host today, Mike Overson, Luminate Bank branch manager up in Savage, Minnesota, just located just outside of the Minneapolis metro area here, about 20 minutes. We are here every Wednesday at noon Central Standard Time, talking about current events in mortgages, real estate, and anything that any of our listeners want to talk to. So you can actually join us live and interact with us during our podcast here. You can find us on Facebook. There's a Facebook live feed. So if you go on there, you can watch us live and submit comments and questions there right on the feed through Facebook. You can also go to our website to get to all of our past shows and to get a link to our current show here as well. And that website, as you can see on the screen, ushometalk.com is where you can find us at there. We also have a real estate hotline, and it also is a live connection to us during the podcast. That number is 612-234-7585. Again, 612-234-7585. Text us during the show. Any questions you have, we'll be happy to answer them live as we move through the next 30 to 45 minutes here. All right. On the show with me, as usual, we have Mr. Jason Walgrave Real Estate Group, Remax Advantage Plus, and we have Marcus Walgrave. He is with Hague Realtors and the South Dakota Home Team in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Welcome, gentlemen.
Good to be here.
Good afternoon.
All right. Topic for today, always an exciting topic. Everyone is on the edge of their seat right now. If you're standing up, you might want to sit down. We're going to be talking about some mortgage rates today.
Woo!
Right?
Exciting.
If there was ever a time for it to be exciting, today is the day.
Yeah. If you're going to catch one of our shows this year, this is the one. The mortgage show, absolutely the most exciting by far here. Reason why we're talking about the mortgage stuff today is, well, we're going to tariffs, right? We're going to talk about tariffs. We're going to talk what's happening with tariffs. How is this affecting mortgage rates? How is this going to affect the housing market? Probably a lot of questions from a lot of people around those particular topics there. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And that's why we encourage you to join us during our show. So watch us on Facebook Live, comment through that, through the comment section there right on Facebook Live, or reach out to us on our hotline with a text, and we'll answer your questions as they come in here during the show. Okay. So I'm just going to get kind of right to it here. I'm going to catch everyone up here. As far as tariffs go, Evan, if you could bring that screenshot up real quick that I had on there earlier. Okay, so look at the bottom. You see the timeline at the bottom, okay? March 31st, right above it, right? That's kind of when the tariff talks started, right? So tariff talks started there. You can see the next 7 days after that, the market reacted positively, right? So as these candlesticks go up, that means interest rates are coming down because the market is getting better. And as the market gets better, interest rates get better. Well, a better interest rate for the consumer is a lower interest rate. And so that's why as these candlesticks go up, the interest rate is coming down, right? Conversely, if these candlesticks are going down, that means mortgage rates are going up. So March 31st, the tariff talks started, and the market was reacting positively to them. That's why those candlesticks were going up. And everyone's like, I'm not so sure about this whole tariff thing going on here. And all of a sudden they see interest rates starting to come down, and they're like, yeah, I kind of like tariffs, right? Now on the flip side, people that were watching their retirement accounts were not happy, right? Because the stock market was going down, and value in people's retirement accounts were going down. So that was the flip side to that. But anyone who was buying a home, right, just got a purchase agreement done. Loan officers talking about locking rates, and they're like, well, what's happening? Well, the trend now is rates are getting better from these tariff talks, and everyone's like, sweet, okay, let's let it ride, baby. Let's go to Vegas. And then the last 3 days, you can see here, boom, big red blobs, right? The reaction of the market turned on these tariffs as the stuff escalates with China, right? Now it's kind of like a trade war. Things turned basically overnight. And you can see the last 3 days have been terrible for interest rates. Mm-hmm. So if we rewound to last week, we look at last Friday, we're sitting at rates of about 6.25, 6.375. Fast forward to today where they're at right now, we're sitting at 6.875 to 7%.
Hmm.
So almost a 0.75% jump in 3 days because of
Wow.
it.
It's pretty incredible.
It's pretty incredible. So that's why we bring it up, because you're going to see it in the news. You're going to see it in the headlines. If you're actively out there and you're a home buyer going through this, this is what you're seeing, and you're not alone.
Mike, when I see your chart, I know you're referencing, the candlesticks, right? I like the colors. Green means good, red means bad.
Yeah.
So for somebody who sees it that way, it's pretty obvious in the last 3 days.
Yep. Exactly. Now it's like, well, what does that mean? It's the world's not ending for sure. If you go back on that chart, if you look at January 13th, look on the far left. See how much lower those candlesticks are?
Mm-hmm.
Interest rates were even higher back on January 13th of this year than they are today, right? We're just all, rooting for it was like we saw January 13th rates are at like 7.25 to 7.375 to 7.5, somewhere in there, right? And since January 13th, you can see kind of rates have gotten better since then, right? And we're all rooting for that. Hey, we want that 5.99 to come along, right? Let's go from 7.25. Let's get into the high fives and just hold the high fives. Like that would be like perfect for our market. It's going to be affordable for buyers. It's still going to be good for sellers. It's not going to oversaturate the market with buyers, things like that. And so we were on that path, right? We were on that path. And just last Friday, we were sitting at the 6.25 to 6.375, like thinking that we're going to be getting there in the next couple of weeks. And then this, pullback happened. So like I said, it's not the end of the world, right? I mean, literally go back 3 months and rates were worse than they are today. It's not fun to see, obviously, a 3-day, kind of beating like this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this chart is super helpful. It's, man, it will be interesting to see, how long, it takes for things to shake out, and I think, all three of us, we're rooting for those, for those 5% interest rates, even if they're in the high fives. That's a nice sustainable number for the banks and the consumers, buyers and sellers. And I think everybody's pretty comfortable with an interest rate, starting with a 5. So, definitely disappointing last few days, seeing this, mortgage interest rates go up, but I think it's temporary. I still believe we're going to be in the 5s, at some point this year, maybe even yet this summer. I'm very optimistic of that. So we'll the weeks will tell. The weeks will tell.
As I say, one thing that any industry, any professional in the industry, whether it's a real estate agent, whether it's a mortgage person, anyone who's been in it for a long enough time will tell their buyers, it's like, hey, this is not something that we need to freak out about, right? This is not the end of the world. Try to stay away from the headlines. The headlines are going to drive fear, and they're going to kind of blow this up like it's a bigger deal than what it is. Is it fun? No, it's not fun. These last 3 days have not been fun for me. Now, fortunately, and kind of going back to like who you surround yourself with, your team that you have when you're buying a house can really help in certain situations and put you in the best spot. I share this screen with my clients who have an active loan going with me who have not locked yet. So they can watch the market with me, right? And then we can talk about it. Hey, Mike, what do you think is going to happen? So as soon as Friday came along, there was some talks about, hey, this thing might reverse. Monday came out, right, which is the very first red candlestick there. So 3 candlesticks back. I was calling everyone to say, look, this is going to be a downward slide in the market. Like, take advantage right now and take the gains we've gotten over the last week and lock in. Every single one of my clients locked in, and now I just saved them 0.5 to 3/4 of a point from that. If you're, so I'm safe, right? I'm safe. They're safe. I'm happy. They're happy. That type of deal. For the loan officers or for the, maybe bigger box companies that don't have that client touch, right? There's probably people that have no idea that their rate just went up 0.5 to 3/4% that they haven't locked in yet. And they're going to get a call eventually to say, oh, hey, I see you haven't locked your rate yet. And, it's 0.75% higher. So here's your new payment. You good with that? There's going to be people getting that call, unfortunately.
Yep.
Though, I think with that being said, if you kind of go back and you go back to February, whatever it is, looks like maybe 10th, 12th, 14th. And you ask a client or consumer at that time, said, "Hey, how do you feel about the rates?" They're gonna be like, "Yeah, I mean, they're pretty good." I feel like if you're coming into the real estate market, you're gonna be a first time home buyer. These rates, even today, they still are acceptable to them. I think if we can get into those fives like Jason was talking about, I think that'll help drive that current homeowner who wants to make a real estate move but is sitting on that 2 3/4, three and a 3 1/4 rate. If we could get in a position where fives, high fives is the norm, I think we're going to see a nice little push in pre-existing inventory hitting the market.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think there's, a lot of sellers out there that, that's their main objection is I just can't give up this interest rate, and there's a lot of 3 and 3 1/4s and some even lower than that. But, so I think you're right, Marcus. I think if we can get into the fives, I think that's still going to happen this year. There's going to be some additional activity in the market, both selling and buying.
Yep. Some of the talk this morning too. So, I mean, there's a lot of economists and stuff like trying to predict what's going to happen here. Right. So it's, you got big box companies that have people, that's all they do is crunch numbers and try to predict and stuff. And a lot of the plays that those places make are based on those projections. So the most predominant projection right now is that the trade war with China, right? Or it appears to be like a trade war with China now with what's going on. Could cause a recession. And if I look back in history, if you look at what a recession does to mortgage interest rates, a recession brings mortgage interest rates down, right? So there are a lot of talks of how the Fed's funds rate, which is also known as prime, like that will come down, mortgage interest rates come down if we do go into a recession as a result of this going on here. Again, most of this stuff just doesn't happen overnight, right? It's a long-term effect. But looking down the road, it might not be pretty now, right? There might be a lot of volatility. But in the end, after this stuff shakes out, what do I think is going to happen? I honestly think that we're going to see lower. And if we go back to last Friday, if we're at a 6 1/4 last Friday, I think we will see interest rates lower than 6 1/4 once this thing ends up shaking out and things settle down from it.
That's good stuff.
You kind of listen too in terms of like the tariff news and it seems like countries are reaching out and they want to work out a deal with the U.S. and so I think you're right. I mean, is this going to happen by Friday this week? Probably not. Weeks, maybe hopeful, optimistic to think that it could be figured out in a couple weeks or 3-4 weeks, but maybe a month or two is what it takes. And so it'll definitely be super interesting to kind of watch how the rates play out here in the upcoming months.
Now, the last time I've seen volatility like this, where you see like a 3-day stretch, right, of this much loss or this much gain in the market, was like back in COVID. Right. COVID happened. You're talking like world economy stuff. You're not talking just the US. Now you're talking world economy stuff, right? Markets and people just don't know how the rest of the world is going to react to certain news and certain things, right? And so when there's a lot of uncertainty, there's big volatility like this. So this kind of brings me back to the COVID days where it was so crazy back then. I remember like it was yesterday. There was a Friday where I called the guy and I said, "Hey, your interest rate's 4.5%. And this is like at 9 o'clock in the morning, right? Hey, we can lock you in now. Conventional loan, 5% down. Your rate's at 4.5% right now. A lot of ups and downs. I don't know what's going to happen. What do you want to do?" He's like, let's just wait and see what the end of the day brings. Okay. So I call him at 4:15 PM. You're never going to believe this, but your rate now is 3.5%. It went from 4.5 at 9 in the morning to 3.5 by 4:15 that afternoon.
Jeez.
Right? Incredible, right? That's wow. I mean, that just doesn't happen. That's incredible movement in one day. But again, this type of volatility, we're going to see the ups and downs. I mean, tomorrow could bring, we could have a green candlestick that's just as big as 2 of those red ones put together tomorrow,
right? And
we would gain most of it back. Like that's the type of uncertainty and that's coming in the volatility. So who knows? It's a day by day thing now. It'll just be interesting to see how it plays out.
A couple things to keep in mind, Mike, is that There's more certainty around the appreciation of your home, the value increase in your home. I mean, just we look at the historical data, through COVID and through low inventory and through high interest rates when they were, 8.25, almost 8.5. Consistently, homes have appreciated, and I think that we got to keep that in mind, because the cost of waiting, even if the interest rate is a little bit higher, is probably going to be much greater, because the home value is going to continue to go up. And then, not to mention, you guys have Luminate has a fantastic, offering for all their buyers that they get mortgages with this year, and that's a no lender fee refinance. So, hey, you still have the opportunity, if you're a buyer, to lock into today's price. You take the interest rate that's there, and again, it's not terrible. I mean, it's fine. I think anything in the sixes is what I would say is fine. You lock into that price, and then when the rates come down, and of course nobody knows for sure, but I think you can make a good prediction that rates are going to come down. Then when it does, you just refinance. But at least you didn't wait, and on a $400,000 house, even if you're looking at 4% annual appreciation rate, and that's a little bit lower than the 40 or 50-year average annually, that's going to cost you an extra $16,000. And so if you're paying a higher interest rate for a year, is that going to cost you $16,000? Probably not.
No.
Not even close. So those are, you got to look at the big picture. You got to look at, how long do you plan on being in your home? We look at, often we look at rent versus own. I mean, holy smokes, you want to talk about low inventory? How about homes for rent? I mean, that's the lowest. It's the lowest inventory that I can ever remember. And so you can rent a home for X amount, or you can buy it for this. And what are the differences? What are the additional benefits of owning a home? And so we love to run those scenarios and take a look at the data. Take a look at the past data and what it means, and then you can make a good financial decision on buying a home.
If I could make comment on that too, just think about the people, the buyers out there who bought a home when the rates were high 7s and low 8s. How many people told them, "Oh, you're nuts! Don't, this rate's so high, don't do it." Okay, well, they probably had a good chance to take an opportunity of a lender, and working with a lender like Mike, and they refinanced into a rate that was, 6 flat. Maybe was able to capture one of those days. Now they're no longer in that 8; they're in the 6, and they've also got a chance to own that home for the last 2 years to collect on that appreciation. And we're talking high 7s and 8s, right? When there was that couple months window when it was like that. So now we're into the high 6s, and again, it's like that same scenario. It's like, if you are in a position to be able to buy a home, and you need or want to buy a home, don't let the rates be your deciding factor. There's bigger things at play. And then the other point I wanted to make was, I did a radio show in Sioux Falls earlier this week, and there was a member of our local Home Builders Association of the Sioux Empire that was on there. And he made a comment that there are some projections that these tariffs could increase the average new construction home by $9,000 in costs. So again, Jason, you kind of go back to that appreciation, right? I mean, in the Sioux Empire, new construction is a very active and successful sector in the residential market. People are buying new construction, and they're coming off the shelf very quickly. So if they're building them and they are $9,000 more, and that property sells, if you have a pre-existing home, I think we're going to see that again, a nice little an extra drive with that pre-existing home value, throughout 2025, especially if these tariffs, kind of do the things that they may do with new construction and rates. So.
Yeah, I read that article too. That was an interesting article. I also read one about a month and a half ago that talked about, the current administration and some of the deregulations that they're doing or have done or plan to do. It talked about how, what was in place was costing the average homeowner over $40,000, and all of these additional costs to build. And so, so if you think about that, if we can remove $40,000 worth of costs, and even if tariffs bring in an extra $10,000 worth of costs, you're still $30,000 ahead of the game, and so I think it's so important that when you're looking at these things, that you look at the whole picture, and you look at all the different factors that come into play, not just what this is going to do, but you got to look at all of them, good and bad, and then it's like tallying it up at the end. Okay, well, we got some pluses and we got some minuses, but at the end, it's actually going to benefit us, by this amount, and so, but it's, and again, even if the that wasn't there, appreciation alone is going to pass the $9,000 additional costs. So it is, folks, look, it's still a great time to buy. So important for you to align yourself with a top agent and team, a top mortgage team. It's, and having that, all of those team members working on your behalf, because the real estate purchasing and buying and selling of real estate, it is a team effort. It is the agent, it is the mortgage company in person and their team, it's title and it's insurance, and it, the list goes on and on and on about how many people are involved to make this transaction successful for you. So make sure you're making the right choice and you're choosing, the best in your area that have a proven track record of doing an outstanding job and representing their clients at the highest level. And do the research. It's, we talked about this last couple weeks. Last year in 2024, 74% of real estate agents throughout the United States sold 0 homes. Not one, right? So
Donut.
Yeah, exactly. Big donut. So keep that in mind, do some research, choose the best ones that you can find. And Mike, as far as, tariffs go and the economy and the news, and, don't get too worked up about whatever, what happens in the short term. Try to keep the long view and take a look at historical data, because that'll help ease some of that anxiety as well. For sure.
The real estate transaction, the old saying is, yeah, we're running on all cylinders now, that type of deal, right?
Yep.
It's like your real estate transaction, your home purchase, you kind of have like right? You got a V8 going there, right? You got your real estate agent, you got your mortgage guy, you got the insurance, you got the title company, right? You list out, you got 8 main players there. And it's like, if you have the best players, as part of your engine, then you're firing on all cylinders, right? But if you have a couple that are a little bit lacking, right? The engine still runs. You're probably still going to get to the end, right? But it's not going to be as smooth. It's not going to be the type of experience that you're going to want. So that's something to keep in mind there too. The other thing about tariffs, I was with in the builder meeting last Thursday. He's been doing a lot of research on the tariffs and what it is. He was looking at a lot of the stuff happening with Canada, because we get a lot of our lumber for construction from Canada. So the tariffs in place do not affect lumber. There's going to be no additional tariffs or anything on lumber coming from Canada. So then that was not going to increase the cost of any sort of lumber coming from Canada. It was more like consumer type of goods, like he said, syrup, right?
Yeah.
Canadian syrup might cost more because of these tariffs coming down. So he's like, I hate to say it, being a Minnesota Vikings fan, but now we're going to have to get syrup from Wisconsin instead of Canada, right? That's what we're going to have to do.
They got really good syrup over in Wisconsin. Right? My wife's from Wisconsin. If I'm in the store, that's what I try to find. I look for the Wisconsin syrup. So
yeah,
it's good stuff. You don't need to go to Canada.
That's right. So, it's just, we'll see how it shakes out. It's new. You know what I mean? COVID was new. Look at the volatility, these tariffs and stuff. This is new. There's no playbook, right? There's no playbook you go to. Okay, when this happens, okay, what happens? Okay, here's the playbook. It's, we'll fill our way through it, basically. But in the end, I think 2 things you can count on. Number 1, the appreciation of homes because of our inventory, at least in Minnesota and South Dakota. There's obviously areas in Florida, California and stuff that have been pulling back and depreciating a little bit. But you look in the markets that we're active in, right? Mainly active in the Minnesota market here, the South Dakota market, rates up, rates down. It doesn't matter. We've seen steady appreciation in our homes here, up here, the properties in those 2 states for sure. So that's something you can certainly count on there.
Good stuff, Mike.
Well, that's all I have for today. Any other comments, gentlemen?
Oh, I mean, spring is here. Get out and get it.
That's right. Get on the jet ski. Get the jet ski out. Well, we appreciate everyone listening today. We'll be back next Wednesday with another live podcast show here. Feel free to reach out to us anytime. Is the best way to reach to us. Reach out to us. You can have access to us 24/7 there. Any questions or comments you have for us, you can submit right through the website there. On behalf of Jason Walgrave and Marcus Walgrave, we'll see you next week.